What's up, everybody? It is, I think, Wednesday, March 22nd, a little afternoon here on the West Coast. Hope everyone's having a great week. Some craziness with Credit Suisse this week, some other craziness. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, or Insta. So you can find us whatever your preferred platform is. I don't think we've figured out how to do TikTok yet, but maybe one day we'll figure it out. So yeah, just wanted to just quickly open it up for questions. I think we're starting to get some people streaming in here. Yeah, just typical for people, if this is your first time coming to live with WSO live stream with me, I typically try to just answer some questions around anything around Wall Street Oasis, anything around careers in investment banking, private equity, hedge funds, asset managers, careers in finance in general. Try to give you my tips and tricks and my best advice based on my experience and my own professional experience. I worked in investment banking for 2 years and private equity for 4 years. And then just my experience running the Wall Street Oasis community for now almost 17 years. So I've seen cycles like this. WSO was around in the great financial crisis. It was kind of earlier days and we were able to grow through it. But that's where we're at right now. So thanks for the comments. So let's see, here we go. Someone's saying, here we go. This is good. Okay. So Sam says, how do you go about finding a job if you're laid off 3 months into an IB analyst stint? It was just not a good fit. And I feel a bit overwhelmed right now. And the work was kind of toxic. So this is a really tough situation because I think the specific phrase of it was just not a good fit. I think we need to tease that out. And any interviews that you go on to try and get your next job, you need to be able to go into more detail on that, and your answer needs to be a little bit more dialed in. So what I'd ask you, Sam, and I don't know if you're comfortable sharing with the group that's watching here, but what I'd ask you is, was it work performance related? Because they're going to ask you this. Was it cultural fit related? That's kind of where I'd push you to lean in terms of how to answer those questions. I know you're feeling kind of overwhelmed right now. Just know that careers are 30, 40, 50 years long. One hiccup early in your career doesn't define you. And really what defines you is how you're able to kind of recover from that and bounce back. I was fired early in my career, not during my analyst stint, but shortly thereafter when I started in private equity, thinking I had made it to the promised land of buy side. Was fired, didn't know why, was kind of lost, confidence shattered. I ended up getting back into private equity, but at a totally different firm back in New York. I had gone from New York to Boston. I was forced to go back to New York, not because I wanted to live in New York, but because that was the only place I could get a job. And I had made it to many final rounds in Boston at private equity funds, but I was kind of getting blackballed there based on the fact that I couldn't really answer that question well because I didn't honestly understand what had happened. And so you may be in a similar stint. I don't know if it sounds like it was kind of toxic environment, tough environment. So don't necessarily think it's you. If you are open to learning and you are open to working hard and and doing all those right things, then there's no reason why you can't recover from it. But again, my advice is just saying it wasn't a good fit. You need to have a more thought out, nuanced answer to that specifically. Was there one manager that was unreasonable? And you don't want to make it look like you were afraid of hard work. So you got to be very careful about the words you choose there. You might want to actually get a mentor session to talk about this with some people from in our network, because it's a very delicate and tough thing to balance in terms of how you communicate that. Let's see here. What else we got? Wow, we got a lot of questions coming in. Okay, great. So LinkedIn is flowing like the salmon of Capistrano. What's that saying from Dumb and Dumber? Here we go. Here we go. Shahir, tips on outreaching via LinkedIn and landing referrals into equity research. So Shahir, thanks for joining. So my tips on outreach via LinkedIn, I think it's going to be a little bit of a volume game. A volume game with smart customization is kind of the way to go. So what do I mean by that? When you get a connection request, you can actually get, once you're a connection with somebody, you can actually get their email from the profile. I highly recommend getting it off LinkedIn and into an email sequence, using something like Right Inbox, so that you can have not just the initial email sent out, but you can have it automatically bump back to the top of your inbox as unread if they don't respond. And then you have templates, preset templates for like the second response, the second follow-up, the third follow-up, the fourth follow-up. You're like, you're going to follow up 4 times. Are you crazy? Yes, you're going to follow up 4 times. The difference is you're not going to follow up 4 times in 4 weeks. You're going to follow up after your first email, you're going to follow up one week later. Then you're going to follow up 3 weeks after that. Then that next follow-up, you're going to wait 3 to 4 months. And then after that, you can even have a fifth, or I don't know if that's 4 or 5. You can have another one 6 to 9 months later. So you're never really giving up on any of these leads unless they reply and say, stop emailing me. You keep it positive. It feels like you're talking to yourself sometimes, but ideally you're showing progress as you start kind of lengthening those periods of when you're reaching out to them. You're like, hey, I know we haven't had a chance to connect yet, but I just wanted to update you. I ended up securing an internship. I still would love to connect. And you'll find that as you start having more success through your job search and through your career, a lot more people will be willing to talk to you. So that's why I say, you definitely want to slow your speed in terms of, if you're not getting a response back, you don't want to keep emailing and being really annoying. But I don't necessarily say, just if they connected with you on LinkedIn, I wouldn't just say completely ignore them and give up after, one follow-up. So my tips on outreaching versus LinkedIn is get it to email. Landing referrals, again, you should be trying to get on the phone with these people, learning about their career path, learning about what it takes. And equity research, you're definitely going to want to be well versed in like pitching a stock, analyzing a specific names or specific industries, so you can express that interest and then potentially even show them some of your work in terms of research and valuation and stuff like that. So highly recommend our financial modeling training courses, specifically for equity research. I would look at financial statement modeling, discounted cash flow, and valuation modeling course. So you want to know how to do comps and all that good stuff. And Amir can throw a link into those courses. You can just go to wallstreeters.com/courses to see which ones might be relevant there. And stay tuned, because we may actually have an investing analysis course that's a little bit more geared towards an equity research role, that dives more into like, we're 2 things. One, we're releasing a course soon on diving into SEC documents in terms of like what to look for and stuff like that. But then we're going to take it a step further and have a very detailed investing analysis course that's probably coming out late summer, I'm guessing. But yeah, I'll announce that here on a live stream, and obviously in the newsletters and all that stuff, all through WSO. Let's see what we got here. I didn't read this full thing, so hopefully it's a. Oh, this is interesting. Okay. So Tyler from LinkedIn says, in an interview, how do you frame your answer for why you're leaving if your current bank has been experiencing a severe lack of deal flow, cutting bonuses, and have experienced recent analyst turnover? So Tyler, I think this is probably the most like legitimate excuse in terms of like how you answer it. I think what you mentioned is good. However, I would focus more on not saying like it's a severe lack of deal flow, and I wouldn't focus on the cutting bonuses. I think what you can say, and say it in a more polished manner, is something along the lines of, when I joined, I thought I'd be getting more active deal experience. That hasn't been the case. And I understand it's not necessarily anyone's fault. The market's been a tough market, but I am looking to transition to an investment bank that potentially can get me that valuable deal experience, where I'm getting the reps in terms of understanding how a deal process works. So now you're not shitting on the old employer. You're not talking negatively. It's just something you expected to get. You're not getting it. And that's a very valid reason for wanting to move. I wouldn't say anything about cutting bonuses. It just makes you look like you're just, chasing the dollar, which, honestly, as an analyst, you shouldn't be chasing the dollar. You should be chasing the best experience, and the deal flow definitely points to that. You could say something about analyst turnover, although again, you may want to say, along with that lack of deal flow, there's been a little bit more instability in the groups. Obviously, there's been some headcount reductions, and it's just for that reason as well. I think it's just prudent for me to actually be exploring my potential next steps, and that's why I'm talking to you here today. I've heard you guys have done an incredible deal. I saw you guys did this deal in XYZ space. I saw you did this deal in that space, and I'd love just to be a part of those types of deals going forward for my career. I think it'd be a great way to learn from incredibly intelligent people. And so that's what I'm looking for. And that's why this specific firm interests me. So if you delivered something like that, that's genuine. And by the way, I also spoke with Sally over in XYZ group, and she had mentioned this about the culture, and that really is attractive to me as well. Blah, 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 blah. So you're pulling in all the informational interviews, questions you did, all the people that you did, all the stuff around this. You're not shitting on your old employer, but you're mentioning about the lack of deal flow. So you're really focused on your career development. You're not talking about exit ops. You're not talking about bonuses. You're not kind of dwelling on the negative. You're just talking about the positive, what you're looking for and how they fit that mold perfectly. So that's how you should approach it. This is a good one from Ali. Hi, Ali. Thanks for joining. What advice would you give to a 29-year-old transitioning to IB or PE with no financial experience? On the education side, completed all 3 levels of the CFA exam and now doing a master's in finance. So Ali, I would make sure that if you're coming in as an associate, that you bow down to the analysts and you don't expect to leave before them just because you're older than them, especially for the first 4 or 5 months. They're going to be running circles around you in terms of how good at Excel. They're going to know literally 10 times more than you. So if you try to manage them, because you feel like you're older or more senior, it is going to be, you're probably going to get fired, because it's going to be very obvious early on that they're providing most of the value to the deal. And the VPs are going to get annoyed with you if you're bouncing out at 5 p.m. to go to the gym or whatnot, because, you weren't ready for the huge sacrifice and lifestyle that is required for these roles. So what I'd say to you is expect a very tough work-life balance. Expect to even if you're coming in as an associate, expect to be an analyst level type hire, in the sense of you're side by side with those analysts, just trying to make their lives easier. And if you approach it as that teamwork type mentality, where you're coming in with a great attitude, you just want to help, you're staying late with them, especially for those first 3 to 4 months as you're getting ramped up, understanding how a deal process works. As soon as you start getting better at financial modeling, training, all that stuff, I think that's going to make you much more successful. I highly recommend if you have no financial experience, do a financial modeling training course. We have the elite modeling package. I would go through all of that. You need to be able to do DCF, run the trading comps, precedent transactions in your sleep, financial statement modeling, advanced financial statement modeling. You should be able to do, and build it in a way where you're not touching the mouse. You're using Excel the proper way, playing the tools, because when you have to sit next to those people or chip in, you want to be super efficient, just like the analyst who's been living in Excel or PowerPoint for a couple of years. So that's my advice to you, is just really be humble when you first come in, because if you're not, and you don't have the skill set to back up the sense of seniority, then it's the analysts. It's the analysts basically push back. And then it becomes obvious. Then they have no then they're not trying to help you, because they don't see you as part of the team. They see you as an annoying managing associate. Not that you would do that, Ali. But that's my best advice. Here we go. Question from Ibrahim on Instagram. What skills should I work on acquiring to get an internship if my GPA is low? Number one, the most important skill in acquiring is talking on the phone and getting and building relationships with people. If your GPA is below a 3.0, if you're in the US or equivalent internationally, I would usually recommend not even having it on the resume. I would do a resume review with us. I would do a lot of practice phone calls with friends and family, talking about your career, what you want to do, where you want to go. Try to figure out, an internship is super vague. So I have to leave it kind of as a vague response. Is just, I think the most important skill is how good you are on the phone, and are you comfortable networking on LinkedIn, getting those emails into your email chain, being professional? Are you writing the right follow-up copy? Are you staying on top of it? Are you showing kind of initiative, stuff like that? Let's keep going. Ghost asked a good question. Hey, Patrick, hope all is good. How are you, Ghost? Good to see you again. What resources, books should I be reading if I want to understand the general landscape of the finance industry? More than books, I would say more like publications like Financial Times, Wall Street Journal. There's also some good resources like PE Hub for private equity news. But trying to see what interests you more on a career-wise basis, I think reading the news about the industries is somewhat helpful, but I think probably what's more helpful is understanding what the day-to-day looks like at the junior level. So, private equity and hedge funds are very different. It's private markets versus public markets. Private markets, illiquid assets. You're buying companies, holding them for like 3 to 7 years, sometimes longer, and then selling them again for ideally 2 to 5x or more. Hedge funds, much more day-to-day, meritocracy-driven business, very cutthroat, a little bit harder to sleep at night, but some people like this because they're really driven by the markets. They love the public markets and public equities and credit, and they like to come up with ideas with their PM and have that kind of quick iteration and immediate scorecard that they're getting as they go through, but very different day-to-day kind of feel and pace and feel and pace and just overall kind of day-to-day type of stuff. You still need to have like those financial evaluation skills and all that other stuff, that fundamental valuation type skills, unless you're like at a high frequency trading shop and something that's more of a coding game. But I would read more in the forums in Wall Street Oasis, honestly, in terms of trying to get a sense of what the day-to-day is like in terms of private equity, hedge funds, and that type of stuff. And then reading the company database, potentially what it's like working there, like company reviews on like the top private equity funds and whatnot. But to get into PE or hedge funds, at least the top funds, the path is still typically investment banking. It's going to give you your best shot. So even if you know what you like, once you figure out what you like best, you still may need to go the IB route if that's kind of where you're looking to be eventually. Here we go, James. Excuse me. James says, I'm trying to leverage my business transformation experience to get into a turnaround and restructuring consulting. Interesting. I've had first rounds with top 3 restructuring firms, but haven't progressed. Tips. So James, if you're getting the interviews, that probably means your either networking and or resume are looking pretty good. Especially if you got 3 interviews at top or restructuring firms, you haven't progressed. The number one tip is you should be doing mock interviews. Now, if you have friends in the industry that can do this for you, great. If not, you can get mock interviews through our mentor network, which is pretty cheap. You can do like a 30-minute mock interview for like $67 with like a top restructuring professional. And they're going to be honest with you. They're going to tell you like, hey, you're messing up this answer. We also have a corporate restructuring course that's coming out on Wall Street Oasis, I think next week or end of this week. You might want to enroll in that. Make sure you're understanding all the nuances of modeling and all the nuances of restructuring in a financy type environment. I know you said you want restructuring consulting, but still having that knowledge, I think, would just make you a little more kind of nuanced in your answers, potentially more knowledgeable in your answers on like do you understand the full process? So I'd recommend maybe taking that course, or at the very least, at least doing a mock interview with a restructuring professional from our mentor database. There's over 1,000 mentors in that database. We make very, very little money. Our margin's tiny, but I still push people to do that because I think when people leverage that resource, when they do a mock interview, usually everyone like comes back raving and be like, I wish I had done that 6 months ago because I realized like my answer for X, Y, and Z was actually pretty poor. And most of the mentors are excellent about being honest because they don't, they're being hired to like help you career-wise and make sure all your answers are dialed in. So they're very, they're very honest about that. And that's nice because sometimes when you're networking with someone, they don't want to hurt your feelings, or you do a mock interview with a friend or a family, they don't really know what's the best way to answer. And I don't know what, it sounds like you're out of school, but a lot of college kids, especially, they think their answers are a lot better than they are. And to get these jobs, like, that are super competitive, you can't have a good answer. You can't have even a great answer. Your answers need to be exceptional. And so, like, I try to get that point across. Like, you're applying to places where it's like a 1 to 3% offer rate, max. So you can't be the top 5%, top 10% of answers. You need to be the top 1 to 3% of answers. So, like, you have to really dial in, make sure everything is like resonating with the firm you're talking to. Make sure that you have really, you're demonstrating not, and like, it sounds like you have really good business transformation experience. So I'm sure that's why you're landing a lot of these interviews, is because, like, you have somewhat relevant experience. So my question is, how are you, like, communicating that experience? And are you rambling? Is your body language weird? Do you speak? Are you twitching during it? Are you not kind of directed enough in terms of, like, showing the specific ways you help transform the business? And then, if you are doing a good job explaining your experience, are you tying it back to why that's great experience for the restructuring consulting? So those are all questions we could have, that I'd have. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. Let me see what else we got here. Harry has an interesting question. I need to apply for investment banking summer 2024, but I got to sit up high so you can see my head, but I don't have a summer 23 yet on my resume, but application is due in a few days and I won't hear back from my summer 23 interviews by the deadline. Could I just put any incoming line on my resume and apply when I land summer 23, just let the analysts and people at the firm know about it? I wouldn't put incoming for one where you don't have an offer yet. I think it's a little risky. I think people are all in this boat, since summer 2024 is, like, it's just so crazy, like, how early they do the interviews. I think a lot of people are in this boat. So I would try to just tailor your resume to what you do have. And maybe in the cover letter, you can mention that you're in several processes around that. I don't know why they just went off and on again, but I'd be careful with that, like saying you have an internship before you really have it, because then you have to choose one of them to saying you're going there, and it's, definitely interviews are very different from actual offers. So just be careful. You can run the risk if you want to run it, but I don't recommend it. You're welcome, James. Sorry, I'm reading some of these questions. I want to make sure let's see what Robert's saying. Yeah. Hey, Robert. I'm currently in college doing a 9-month internship at a small private equity firm in Dublin. Would you have any advice on how best I can transfer this into an IB graduate role in New York? Robert, do you have the proper visas and whatnot to work in the US? If yes, like if you're a dual citizen or whatnot, I think it's gonna be hard. Otherwise, in terms of how to make your private equity experience look like investment banking, I think you want to focus on, like, the fundamental valuation stuff that you did there, the financial modeling stuff you did. So, really making sure your bullets are dialed in around what an investment banking analyst role looks for. And then once that resume is dialed in around those skill sets, maybe doing some financial modeling training as well and getting that on the resume, so you're really kind of hitting on all the points. Then it's, again, like I say, like a broken record, it's going to be who you get on the phone to get yourself into the processes. And once you get an interview, if you can get interviews into these processes, assuming visas aren't an issue, then it's anybody's ball game in terms of who gets the actual offers. So, but yeah, you're going to have to definitely, I don't know what college you're in right now or if there's any on-campus recruiting, but you're going to have to definitely hustle. And since you're a more non-traditional candidate, you're not just going to be able to, like, apply on campus likely. So if you do want to make that transition to New York, it's going to be a lot of legwork. And the good news is you're not saying bulge bracket IB graduate role. Like, there's a lot of middle market boutiques. And if you have strong internships on your resume, private equity firm would be a great one. And you're great on the phone and you can kind of meet with these people, then potentially they can find a seat for you. Of course, the markets doesn't make things easy right now because a lot of people are getting laid off. You got to think of all the Credit Suisse interns now that are potentially not going to have a summer internship. All of those people are hitting the market. So there's a lot of people right now searching for very few seats. This is great. Daddy says, hi, Patrick. Apart from maximizing my GPA, what do you think my focus should be on to compensate for my non-finance major engineering? Number one, get finance internship experience. Number two, do financial modeling training. Get that all over your resume. Make sure you have like specific coursework that's financial related. So, even though it's not your major, you should be taking macroeconomics, micro, any sort of finance or accounting classes and kind of featuring that near the top of your resume in terms of select coursework or relevant coursework. So highly suggest once you have some of those things under your belt to potentially get a resume review and help yourself. Maybe you can talk to somebody in our mentor network, get a resume review from somebody who was an engineer that broke in and get their feedback once you kind of have some of those boxes checked to give them something to work with. You may, if you're struggling with a finance internship, I don't know what year you are in school. You should definitely apply to our finance research analyst internship at Wall Street Oasis. It's a great CV filler for those freshmen that can't land a good freshman summer. You can get a lot of finance buzzwords all over your resume with it. And it shows that interest, and people in the industry kind of tend to be curious about Wall Street Oasis and what goes on the inside. So oftentimes we've heard from interns that the interviews end up being all about that internship and what you did and the topics you researched and stuff like that. So it tends to be a pretty valuable internship to have there. So maybe we can put a link to that. Or if you guys go to wallstreetoasis.com and you check out under career, there's a link to the bottom right under career, WSO Finance Research Analyst Internship. You can see where to apply there. We don't accept we accept probably like 10 to 20% of applicants into that. But if you do a decent job on the application, you should be able to get in. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, here's the link. So it's a little tough. You could just search it. You can do WSO Finance Internship or Research Internship, or you can just go under the career drop down and find it there. Yeah, so Robert said, thanks, Patrick. Mainly talking to a lot of London investment bankers through LinkedIn, which has been very helpful on flagging my CV for HR. Yeah, that's great. If you're already getting on the phone with a lot of people, I would do the same thing for New York. To see if you really want to get to New York, that's what you're going to have to do there. So good to see you're already getting on the phone. That's like half the battle right there. It's just being comfortable picking up the phone and setting up those informational interviews. Let's see what's okay. Michael's asking, what course would you recommend for someone who has no knowledge of anything IB finance and have interviews coming up in a month? I would recommend our investment banking interview course. We're actually just releasing, I think this week, a new flashcard module, which will allow you to drill down on, I think 20,000 or 30,000 questions from over a decade by firm. So if you know you have an interview coming up at a specific firm, you can literally just go, hey, Goldman Sachs, boom, DCF questions, click, 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 click. Filters through, shows all the user submitted questions and answers for those specific questions of interviews at Goldman or at whatever bank you have interviews at. And that's like a killer feature we're just releasing that I'm super pumped about because it's leveraging all the tens of thousands of data we've collected on top of having all the most common ones kind of broken down and stuff like that. So I think if you have a month, you can do a lot of damage in a month if you really take it seriously. But I'd carve out at least a couple hours a day. If you have no knowledge of anything IB finance, you may want to start something a little bit more basic, like our accounting foundations course, and then graduate to the IB interview course. The accounting foundation is going to be very much more like walking you through, what is working capital, how to look at a balance sheet, income statement, balance sheet. So you have like a little bit more of a foundation before like jumping straight into the questions and having no clue what like even a discounted cash flow is or what WACC is or any of that stuff. Because what happens is sometimes people jump to the technical questions right away because you're so concerned about like, I can't get a technical question wrong, and they're freaking out. Turns out they get into the interview and the guy's like, why investment banking? Why this firm? Tell me about yourself. And these are 80% of the interview are those three questions. And the person thinks they have a good answer to that, or they BS through it. And it's just not, again, it's not exceptional. It's good. It's a good answer. It's a fair answer. It's an average answer. And it's not going to get you to the next round. So before you even kind of drill on all the technical questions in our IB interview course, I always say, hey, well, why don't you look at the behavioral questions first? Make sure you have those three things. Why IB? Tell me about yourself. And why this firm specifically. So you can think of why this firm, you can bucket into two brackets. One, like if it's a boutique, you can talk about more responsibility, experience. If it's a bulge bracket, you talk about name, having a great platform to help get more deals and that type of stuff. So yeah, it's tough. If you know nothing, if you know knowledge, you should be studying at least a couple hours a day to really get ready and give yourself a shot. But you can make it. Like a month is a long time. You can learn a lot in a month if you dedicate yourself to it. So, but if you want to give yourself a shot, I recommend at least an hour or two every single evening, kind of going through that stuff. Yeah, Michael asked, could you link it? Thanks. Yeah, the IB interview course, if you go under wallstreetassociates.com/courses, you just hover over that on the homepage, on the top menu, you'll see that under the interview prep courses, IB interview is right there. That's going to be that IB interview course. It's actually 3 courses. One's a technical interview course, one's a behavioral interview course, and one's a networking course. Forget about the networking if you're already landing interviews. Go straight to the behavioral first. Again, make sure that those 3 questions that I mentioned to you are just completely dialed in. There's examples in the course to show you how to kind of structure your answer. And more importantly, you want to start building what I call the 7 stories. 7 stories being stories about your experience, whether school, internships, whatnot, projects, extracurriculars, where it'll help you map any sort of question that comes in as a behavioral interview. You can map to one of those 7 stories quickly. So people are like, what do you mean 7 stories? You need stories. And you don't want to be thinking up of stories on the fly when somebody says to you, hey, talk to me about a time when you had a conflict with a superior or you had a conflict working in a team. What did you do to resolve it? You need to have these stories ready. You're not going to be like coming up on the spot, like being like, damn, I don't know. That's a really good question. Like, what do you do? It just shows you're not ready. So to be ready for those questions that are kind of tricky, behavioral, strength, weaknesses. Yeah, sure. Tell me about yourself. You should be structuring them, having stories, because you don't want to be saying, hey, I'm such a hard worker. Hire me because I'm a hard worker. That's telling them. That's not showing them. Show them stories. So you need those 7 stories ready before you even walk in the interview room. You need to have practiced them. You need to be doing mock interviews. So let me back up. IB interview course to actually guide you, but you need to put in the work of writing your own stories and in the proper structure. So situation, task, action, result. Action meaning like, what did you do? What was the result? A lot of people miss that last part, which makes the answers and makes the answers you're giving much more genuine and believable. Of like, oh, this is what I did. Oh, that's a great question. Blah 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 blah. That reminds me of the time when I did this, and they're going to be paying more attention versus you just telling them that you're a hard worker or making up some bullshit, weakness that no one cares about. Here we go. Some good questions from Tanner. Hey, Patrick, love your content. High school grades are mediocre and will likely be attending a non-target this fall. If I were to transfer, is it more optimal to do so as an incoming sophomore or as a junior? Sophomore. And I'll tell you why, Tanner. Transfer as a sophomore, simply because recruiting happens now in sophomore year, believe it or not. Spring sophomore is when a lot of the IB, if you're going for top finance roles, if you wait till junior year, oftentimes you've missed the boat, and it's like your odds dramatically drop if you don't have that internship secured end of sophomore year for junior summer. it's insane. They're like interviewing so early, over a year ahead of time. So it sucks, but that's the reality of the timing. I think you should really, 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 really aim for that sophomore year. So make sure you get that 3.9, 4.0, get your grades up high at that whatever non-target you attend in the fall, and then shoot for the transfer. And remember, it doesn't have to be at a top target. You can go to semi-target with a good IB workshop program and still do a lot of damage. So Wen says, hey, first of all, thanks for the value you're providing to all of us. How can you somebody be pretty competent in finance industry amongst a competitive industry? I feel like everyone in my union is more than me and has more experience than me. Wen, great question. So I think it's important to step back. This is the same thing I said to somebody earlier in the chat where they were like, I got fired, I feel overwhelmed. It's very hard when you're an 18, 19, 20-year-old to have perspective over like a 43-year-old like me, looking back at like when I got fired or when I was striking out in interviews when I was at Williams early on. I got to a final round at Goldman Sachs, struck out hard, like got the good cop, bad cop, and I just got completely destroyed in those interviews. And so I think along all of that, I think what really matters isn't like the success. It's not the time like you succeed. It's how you respond to each setback and having that growth mindset. So, you feel like you're behind everyone at your uni. Maybe they know more than you right now, and maybe they have more experience than you. But if you really want it and you're okay with being patient, you may not actually get a job in investment banking right out of school because maybe you are behind. Maybe you're a junior, maybe you're a senior. I don't know. My point is, if you want to get there, you can actually get there if you continually push in terms of actual skill development and networking and relationship development. If you do those two things and you really do want it and you're patient with yourself and you don't give up at the first sign of like a setback or, you fail in interviews or you can't even land an interview, you have to try to figure out what pieces are missing. So, yes, it's very competitive. If they know more than you, what do they know more? Do they know more because they've just read more Wall Street Oasis and they know like the processes and they know all this stuff? Do they know more because they have parents in the industry? Do they know more? Like, there's a reason they know more. Somebody told them something or they read something somewhere. It's not magic. None of this is magic. It's just reading. Do you really want to do it? Are you willing to sacrifice? And if those answers are yes, then you need to have like the imposter syndrome. Anyone can do this work. This isn't like, we're not talking PhD level economics or quant algos. Like, we're talking like it's a sales job. This is a sales job. So you need to get good at financial modeling. You need to understand valuation. You need to understand all this stuff, but that's all learnable. It's learnable in like months, not years. So like over the summer, are you improving yourself? Are you actually dedicating and setting a schedule for yourself such that, you're not getting distracted by all the things that can distract kids nowadays, but you're actually like putting in the time to improve yourself and improve your skill set. And I think that's the hardest part for young people today is like, you guys are dealing with so many more distractions and so many more things than what I had to deal with when I was growing up. So it's easy to say like, oh yeah, just go study, but like you guys are dealing with a lot more. So I would just say, can you set yourself a schedule and keep yourself chipping away and improving every day just a little bit? You don't need to improve a lot every day. You just need to improve a little bit, and it just starts stacking on itself. It's like what I said to Grace, one of my mentees. As part of my program, like she started with me freshman year. By the time she was a junior, she was like super, super polished. But that was because she put in the work. There wasn't any magic. She just got on so many damn phone calls that she was like so comfortable. By the time she was in an interview, she already had like conversations with half the people at the firm. And so that's how you can be more competitive, is just by like setting a schedule, sticking to it, and improving something in your application every single day. Whether that's, getting a resume review, whether that's doing financial modeling training, whether that's just reading about the industry for free. You can post your, getting finding a friend to help do mock interviews together. If you want to do it for free, do it for free, but do something. Don't look around and be like, I'm so behind, I'm never going to make it, because then it's just a defeatist attitude. You never actually are going to make it. But if you think to myself, hey, if I put my head down and if I want this bad enough, you can get it. I think anyone can really do it. It's just most people do give up because it is hard. So I can see some of these. I hope you guys, sorry, some of you can't read some of these comments. I can see some comments about that. Let's see. So how would a non-finance major comp side demonstrate internship into finance in their resume to land IB finance interviews? I was thinking finance certifications, but how? Sure, certifications, financial modeling training, internships, any sort of internships. Again, the finance research analyst internship we have would be a great one. But any other, if you have to, freshman summer, you can't find any other internship, do a private wealth management internship, do something in finance, and then take classes outside of comp sci that you feature at the top of your resume, relevant coursework when you're applying to finance firms. That's the best thing you can do. You just want to basically you want to de-emphasize the computer science on your resume, and then just have throw finance, economics, whatever, anything related to finance all over your resume as much as possible. If you're doing a bunch of comp sci projects, de-emphasize those. Don't just say, oh, this is a really cool comp sci project. I'm going to list it because it makes me look smart. But you already have comp sci as your major. If half your resume is then more comp sci stuff, yes, it's going to be tough. So I would suggest that you do that. Hey, Ashraf. Ashraf's asking, hello, Patrick. Thanks for doing these sessions. Could you please offer any insight on the best way to transition from a corporate background into investment banking after going through a top-tier MBA? Ashraf, did you do on-campus recruiting when you were at your MBA? Because the MBA is kind of that shot. That is the best way, is when you're getting your MBA, to do on-campus recruiting there and to recruiting out of that. Now, let's say it sounds like you went to a corporate background, but now you're looking. I think what you're saying is you did your MBA, went to corporate, but now you're looking to get an MBA. You're an incoming MBA starting September. So yeah, so for that, the best way is to make sure you're super polished for your interviews, because if it's a top tier MBA, you're going to be getting ideally at least 5 to 10 first round interviews at all these banks. So making sure, coming from corporate, they're probably going to drill you a little bit on the technicals, making sure you're comfortable with that. But then also having a good reason of why that specific firm you're interviewing with. Because if you're giving kind of generic answers to all of them, it won't look as good. So I always say you can kind of stand apart by doing the research on the specific firm, talking about their specific deals, and then mentioning people you spoke to at that specific firm. It just shows you are really interested in that specific firm, and it makes them feel good. Oh, you know what? Ashraf is all in on Evercore. So we're going to give him a final round interview. And then in the final round interview, it's really about showing them that you understand what the job is. Hey, you didn't do IB before. Are you sure you're ready for the hours? Yes, I'm ready for absolutely. I'm really excited about this. And I understand the analysts are going to be, more skilled. I really want to work alongside them. Showing that you have that kind of humble, ready to work, hungry attitude, I think can go a long way for post MBA associate roles. So I would suggest that. Kavya asked a question near the top of the chat. I am scrolling, Kavya. I'm looking for it. There's a lot of comments here because we got, there's a lot of stuff here. Real quick. I'm going to buy the IB technical course soon. What could I learn? What I learned from IB transfer? Yeah. Sales and trading IB interviews for at undergrad, they're sometimes almost identical. So yes, it's totally transferable. Investment banking, you can think of it as more of a umbrella term for S&T, M&A, restructuring, all that stuff. So yeah, the course would cover all that stuff. Kavya, I'm looking for your question. Sorry, I'm having trouble. Here it is. I started in Big Four a few months ago. Do you think a financial due diligence a few months ago? Do you think transferring to a bulge bracket reach or middle market IB within a year is doable? realistic, or is the timing off because of the economic situation? Would an MBA pivot in a few years be more doable? So the MBA is going to give you a best shot if you get into a top program being really like top 15-ish. And you can look at the stats and placement stats on IB. They're all pretty good. It's pretty good out of a top MBA. So the MBA is definitely more doable, but it's a lot more expensive, right, than doing it direct. So what I would say to you is you should definitely try to break into IB without the MBA, because it could save you a couple $100,000, keep you out of student debt. So I think, yeah, transferring to bulge bracket would be a reach. Is it doable or realistic? I would put the odds of I don't know what the rest of your application looks like. I don't know what school you went to. I don't know, how it's looking. I think within a year is a little early. 2 years is probably more realistic, especially you're talking bulge bracket, just because, not because part of it, because there's like your resume, you don't want to be jumping so much. And it looks a little bad if like 6 months in, you're starting to network and looking for your next jump. That's one of the reasons I'd say that it's not as doable within a year. The second reason is I'd say that you're not going to have as many like deals on or engagements on your CV to make it look as good. And then you're not going to have as much time to like network properly and show that interest. So I'd say a better range is probably 1.5 to 2 years. I honestly think it's dangerous to go too early from your first job, like 6 months or a year jumping. I think it looks good if you're at a place for a couple of years and you're at a Big Four. It's a good brand, likely. So I think it's doable and realistic if you get really good at the interview skills, evaluation skills, all that stuff. You can talk to the diligence work and how relevant it is. I'm not as well versed in how good FDD places into IB. I know transaction advisory services. Is it the same as financial due diligence? Is that just another acronym for it? If it is, then I think it's very common. And middle market IB is obviously much more open. But it's going to be really, how many conversations are you doing per week with actual bankers at these things, and how good are you at kind of staying in touch with them and developing these relationships, so that when there is an opening for laterals or whatnot, you're in that lateral hiring bucket in an interview process. So yeah, I think I would normally say it's very doable. If you were talking to me in 2021, I'd say, like, if you have a pulse and you're interested and you have a little bit of that relevant background, I think you could have transitioned really easily. I think right now it is going to be a little bit harder, and I wouldn't necessarily jump too early because you just started a few months ago. So I know you may be eager to do that. You may want to start like building some of those relationships now, and you may, by chance, maybe there's suddenly a need somewhere and they like you. But I wouldn't be pushing hard for that. I think the beauty of doing the calls early now, or 6 months into your job at FDD, is starting to have those conversations. Isn't so much to be like, hey, can you let me know when an opening happens? But it's more of like exploratory. Hey, I'm just really curious about, what it's like to work there. Can you tell me more about the different groups, all this stuff? And then you're going to have those notes for later on. So when you're doing potentially a real interview a 1.5 years later, you can reference those conversations because you've taken good notes. Because you've taken good notes, you can mention the people you've spoken to at that firm. And so I think that's going to be more important, is kind of laying that foundation so that year two, mid-year, 1.5 years, year two, when you start actually making more of that aggressive push of wanting to make that transition and truly getting into that recruiting market, that you're actually ready for it and you have the relationship foundations kind of laid already. So hopefully that's helpful. What else? Harkush, you can apply to our finance research. We've taken high school seniors before for our finance research internship. So look under career, apply there. And if you write well, then you have a shot at getting in. Hey, Patrick, thanks for the Q&A. Here we go. Fabian, great question. So You have a summer analyst role at a bulge bracket this year. I'm a bit concerned due to the current circumstances. What is your opinion regarding the conversions compared to the last year? So the people who aren't aware, conversion, summer analyst to full-time offer conversion rate. So basically, in some years, some banks will give, let's say they have 10 interns, they'll give 10 offers. That would be 100% conversion. In other more difficult years, that can drop pretty significantly. And some firms are notorious for having a very low conversion, say sub 50%. Others are notorious for always having very high conversions, say 90+%. And so it depends on the BB. It depends on the bulge bracket. I don't know which bulge bracket it is. If you want to get some stats around this, Fabian, we do have a company database on Wall Street Oasis where we collect this data over the last 10 years through thousands of entries. We collect all this on like the salary data, the resume, the company reviews. So if you go into, I'll just pull it up right now. I'll run down the offer rates right now for you guys, so you can kind of see based on IB industry reports. Sorry, let me just get to it. If I go to the investment banking industry report, so you go wallstreetassist.com/resources/industry-reports. If you go to investment banking, we have investment banking, private equity, consulting, and hedge funds. If you go there, and then if you go to, let me go to company reviews. I have access to this, obviously, because I'm an admin. Or if you're a WSO premium subscriber, you'd have access to this, but I'll just share it with you guys for free because you're here and you're fans. I'll give you this stats for some of the bulge brackets to give you. And all this data, by the way, is always updating. These reports are like alive in the sense of like every time there's a new user submission, the data is continually updating. So we're collecting, I don't know, several thousand submissions every single month into this. So it's pretty up to date and accurate. But let me look. Obviously, we don't have data on conversions this summer, and I would absolutely expect the offer rates to be lower this summer for obvious reasons. They probably gave too many internship offers based on what they now want to hire for full time. So let's say if a firm historically has offered 80%, I would probably expect it to be closer to 50 to 60%. So I'd expect 20 to 30% of less people to get offers this year. That's just rough numbers based on what I'm guessing they offered. But let me give you some rough stats on just the bulge brackets. There's obviously a lot of firms here. There's some like boutique firms who have really impressive stats in terms of offer rates, like Centerview's up at 90%. Stifel, William Blair has almost an 88.8% intern to offer rate. Let me see on the bulge brackets. So Wells looks like it has a very high offer rate here based on this data. 85%.
Pat, are you sharing your screen?
I'm not sharing my screen. I'm quickly going through some of these numbers just for bulge brackets, the intern to offer full offer rates. I'm just going to give some quick stats. So Barclays around 82%, BAML around the same 80%, UBS around 80%. So they're all pretty close. Citi a little lower, 78%, but still pretty high. JPM a little bit lower, around 73%. Deutsche is 72%. So I'm not seeing Morgan Stanley 68. Morgan Stanley a little lower, 68%. Goldman 65%. So some of the top names have a little bit of the lower. So Goldman, Morgan Stanley, some of the top names have a little bit lower offer rates. So what I'd say to that is like, you can probably shave off 20% from those numbers for this summer. And that would probably be a good kind of a proxy in terms of what to expect. But I mean, you got to control what you can control. And I think the best way to go into being concerned is actually not necessarily a bad thing, because maybe you're going to work a little bit harder and be a little better of an intern. Just trying to make sure you're available for the analysts, make yourself as valuable as possible, see if you can take work off their plate any way you can without being annoying and getting in their way. And we're coming up on almost an hour, so I'm going to call it, guys, before my voice goes out. But thanks, everybody, for joining. Really appreciate all of you. Should have a big announcement next week. So I hope you all join again next week or the week after. We'll see. But something that may help a lot of you. Something fun. So that's it for now. Let's do this again next week around 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 Pacific. Bye, everybody. Thank you.